Keith, can you please tell us about your professional career?
Okay, I think I'll start off though. I'll start off right with my schooling, okay?
Perfect.
My first school, well, I went to kindergarten, and there was nothing exceptional about that, excepting I remember on the first day going to the back of, it was a church in Johannesburg, and going to the back of the church and bawling my little eyes out. That was the most memorable thing about the kindergarten. And then I went to Parkview Junior School in Johannesburg, and there was nothing, again, particularly exceptional about that. The nicest thing about that was that I think my parents must have taken me to school, and I'd walk home about 2 miles at that stage, either by myself or with Digby, my best friend, and we'd be kicking stones as we walked home. But there was academically, there was certainly nothing spectacular. I think I was madly in love with my English teacher, Miss English, not English teacher, with my grade 1 or grade 2 teacher, Miss English. Then from standard 1, so I must have been, I don't know, 9 or 10, went to Parkview Senior School, and the best thing about that was that it was directly over the road from our house. So again, there was nothing too exceptional. I did okay. I never failed any subject, but I never did anything particularly brilliant. On the sports field also, I was okay, but nothing special. Then I went, when I was 12, went to Parktown Boys High, and then I had to catch a bus to and from school. And again, I was always, I think, I was always above average. Me and Garrison Keeler were always above average, but I was never the best. At high school, I think I always came either 4th or 5th in the class out of 25, but I was never first.
Keith, I think you underestimate yourself because you were consistently good across the board.
No, I was pretty consistently 4th or 5th. So in class, but I was never nothing very brilliant. And sporting-wise as well, at school, I loved playing rugby, but again, I wasn't in the first team, which I would have liked to have been, but I wasn't. And I enjoyed my rugby. It was great. So that's school. So really, there was nothing particular. And then the only thing I ever wanted to do was to do medicine. My dad obviously was a professor of medicine, of radiology, and even when I was born, he looked at me and said I looked like Voltaire's death mask, but he looked at my hands and said I'll be a surgeon. And that's all I really wanted to do. There were a couple of little side tracks when I thought I might want to be a wildlife photographer, a game warden, but nothing very serious about that.
Why do you think that you only had the one profession in mind, basically?
Why?
Yeah.
I suppose it's what I knew with my dad. He was a doctor, and I know he took a long route to get there, and he liked it, and it must have just been in me or ingrained in me. I was pretty good at science. I wasn't particularly good at maths. I was okay, but not particularly good. I was okay at lab. I was okay at everything actually, but probably science was what I liked the best. And then I got into medical school. I did okay. My matric I didn't do as well as I'd hoped to.
Can we hear why?
Why? Well, I don't know.
No,
I worked very hard. I studied very hard.
Did your dad not give you a little help?
My what?
Didn't your dad?
Oh, well, that was with maths. Yeah, with the maths test. He decided that I should sleep well the night before, and he gave me Phenergan, an antihistamine. So I slept very well the night before, and I think I slept very well throughout the whole exam as well. But I got 3 B's, 2 C's, and a D, and I can't remember what I got the D for Afrikaans. So I was hoping to get B's and maybe a couple of A's, but I didn't. But it was enough to get me into medical school. And at medical school, I did 3 years, and then our medical school was great because we had the opportunity. It was a fantastic faculty, and with Raymond Dart, one of the fathers of the study of human evolution, right in our department with a lot of the exciting skulls that had been found in our department. And then his big protege, Philip Tobias, also a brilliant, world-famous guy, and he had the opportunity to study under these guys. And so after my third year medicine, so that was my year of doing physiology, bacteriology, pharmacology, and pathology in third year. And then before starting the clinical years, I then branched off, which was going to be for a year, to do a BSc, Bachelor of Science. So I did that officially in anatomy and physiology, but my main interest was paleoanthropology, and South Africa being one of the origins of the species Homo sapiens, with a lot of the skulls that came from East Africa, from Olduvai Gorge, from Leakey, came down to Johannesburg to be described by Philip Tobias and by our department. It was just an amazing time to be there, and it was very exciting. So I did that for a year. And then at the end of that year, I went overseas, and I had letters from Philip Tobias to the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, to the British Museum of Natural History in London. And I went to all these museums, and I was welcomed and sat down, and I could look at the original fossils. And I remember I wanted to see the Piltdown hoax, which is a very famous skull, and it turned out to be a hoax, at least. I think the upper part was a hoax. I sat down with a he brought this shoebox, and out of the shoebox they took the skull, and I had a magnifying glass, and I could see the file marks on the teeth of the skull. And it was just amazing to actually hold it in my hands and see all these original fossils. So that was very, very exciting. And then I came back and then did another year doing my honours, and that was in paleoanthropology. And that was fun. That was exciting. And
can you tell us about how you showed people around those digs?
Oh yeah. So when we were doing BSc, and then also the next year with honours, at the Makapansgat site and also the Sterkfontein site, which are two very famous fossil sites in South Africa, we would take people on tours, and then we had Philip Tobias, who was such a brilliant lecturer. We could use him, copy how he entranced the crowds, or try to emulate him. And so we take tours around the caves. We have some of the casts and some of the skulls, which we demonstrate to people. And then when we were doing our BSc, there was a History of Mankind, I think that's what it was called, exhibit in the Johannesburg City Hall, put on by our department. So that really got us all into, because we had to teach everybody, and we were just learning ourselves, but that was a real quick way to learn. So that was fun, having this History of Mankind put on by the anatomy department.
And then when did you actually do the Bushman movie?
I can't remember. It was during my... when was it? It was during my BSc year, or honours, one of the 2 years. And then I went into the Kalahari Desert and spent time with the Bushmen. And then had my good old 8mm camera movie and took the movie. And then came back and edited it.
Did the whole department go? I mean, how were you selected to go?
No, I think all of us who were doing our BSc at that... No, it wasn't all of us. It was only a few of us. Because there was a dental student. There was Peter Cleaton Jones, who was a dental student. So it wasn't the whole. And I mean, the department wasn't that big in pure science.
Yeah.
This wasn't a medical school class. This was just a science class.
I understand that. Yeah. So it was during that time.
Yeah. So that was. That was fun going off into the desert. What else did I do during my BSc? Unfortunately, Tobias, we'd had various research projects. I did a project on the conducting system of the heart and learnt about the Purkinje fibers, and I dissected this I used to get a cow's heart and show everybody, and then a couple of other projects, but we were never encouraged to publish as students. Tobias kind of was, I don't know, he didn't encourage us to publish. And one of the main studies I did was on a fossil skull, and I described the skull, which Tobias gave me to describe, and I think my conclusions that I came to weren't exactly according to what he said. And again, he didn't even sort of get me to publish the results of that. Even if my conclusions were not according to his desires or wishes, it would have been nice if he could have encouraged me to, or at least to get a publication out of it.
Yeah,
so that was a little, retrospectively, a little disappointing, but it's not. It's still. It was
but
not
that was South Africa
Yeah.
at the time. That
Yeah,
was
no,
just
sure.
the norm.
Yeah.
Keith, I think you've described that BSc and BSc honours years, and then what? Because it was rumoured at that time that Keith Kaye was going to become following in Philip Tobias's path and become an anatomist.
No, I never really was going to do that as a long-term thing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was great, and it broadened my education. So I did during one of the years, I think honours year, I had some time, so I registered for a history of art course down at the main university campus, and that was great. I wasn't going to take exams or do anything, but just to learn about it, and I thoroughly enjoyed going down to the lectures and hearing about the Scream and various other paintings. So that was great, that opportunity. But I was never going to be an anatomist or go full-time into paleoanthropology. I always knew I was going to come back into medicine. There was no doubt about that. Okay. I had registered for either a master, I think it was a master's or a PhD, master's actually, not a PhD at that stage. But I never got around to doing it, because once I went back into my clinical years, then I just got wrapped up with the clinical years. In fact, I finished my BSc exams, I think in February, or my BSc honours exams in February, and then I even missed the first 2 or 3 weeks of fourth year, which was our clinical year. So everybody else knew how to examine a patient, and by the time I came along, and I didn't have a clue what was going on at the beginning and had to catch up. But then started the clinical years, that was 4th, 5th and 6th year. And I enjoyed it all. It was challenging, it was very interesting. I mean, 4th year, learning how to examine patients and being in the wards and being in the operating room and being in theatre, I should say. And what other subjects did we do in 4th year? I'm trying to think. Public health, didn't we? And
well, the clinical one. At which stage did you decide that surgery was for you?
Oh, right from the time I was a second-year medical student and doing our human dissections. I was always going to do some form of surgery. I mean, at that stage I thought I was going to do heart surgery or brain surgery like anybody. You think that those are the fields of surgery. But even when I was doing my BSc, I did a project on the heart, well, partly the conducting system, because I was going to go into surgery. So it was always going to be some form of surgery.
You entertained OBGYN at some point.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I basically enjoyed everything when I was in it. After the first week or two, I never enjoyed any of the fields because I didn't know what I was doing and where I was and where things were. But afterwards, I enjoyed all the, all the subjects. I thought of doing OBGYN for a while, and then I think I did a month's locum in it, and then decided that wasn't for me. And then urology was. Firstly, the head of the department was so nice. Noel van Black was a terrific guy. And the field just seemed so interesting. You had a bit of medicine in it. You had nice little toys to play with, scopes to look at. And it seemed like it was a manageable field, I thought. whereas general surgery was too broad. And that's one thing I wouldn't do over again. I remember going to speak to Gus Caselta. Gus, you remember very well, was probably one of the leading urologists in South Africa. And I went to his house once, and right when I was about to start surgery, and he advised me to do a full training, a full 7 years in general surgery before starting urology, even though I was entertaining urology at that early stage. And that's...
Did he say why?
I think just to be a proper, fully trained surgeon.
Did he do it?
Yeah, I think he did actually.
And he thought it was important.
Yeah. But retrospectively, I spent a lot of that 7 years was bookwork, and rather than learning to operate. And I think I always had to get through the exams, and it was a challenge to get through the exams. I had to work very hard, study hard, and basically summarize the whole of our textbooks. I summarized the whole of Schwartz's textbook of urology, I think, and I had 3 volumes of my notes, and then had to learn them. And basically, by the time came to the exam, I could almost quote my 3 notefuls, not off by heart, but that's just how my brain works.
Yeah, but that's
But what I should have done more was to learn how to operate, because at the end of my 7 years, I really could do precious little well on my own. I could do the hernias and appendix and that kind of stuff, but I really was in no state to do any other surgeries. And even with urology, I had to, if it was going to be my field, I had to cover the bases. So I got, I think, one of the British textbooks of urology, and I summarized all of that, which was great. And that for me was a good way to do it. But I should have rather, instead of doing those 7 years, spent more time just using my hands and doing the surgery. I think I really learned, even in urology, to do the big surgeries once I'd come out of my training.
Isn't that with everybody though?
To a degree, but I think, and also maybe the training's a bit better here in the States. In South Africa, we were often left on our own, which was good in a way and not good in a way. I mean, as a general surgery resident, if a stabbed heart came in, I would take that stabbed heart to the operating room, to theatre myself, as you well know, and I'm sure you scrubbed in on many stabbed hearts as well. But Baragwanath, stabbed heart and stabbed abdomen, so we learned very quickly. So I suppose it was good in that way.
So in retrospect then, with the general surgery, had you spent less time with the bookwork and more hands-on, do you think that would have been helpful?
I couldn't have done less work with the bookwork. That's how I had to do it. I had to get through the exam. I had to know that I'd covered the whole field, that there was nothing that I think I left out 1 or 2 chapters, maybe on the immunology or something. That was just too much. I thought, well, if they asked me on that, too bad.
Yeah, but Keith, if you can explain how different the exam techniques are in South Africa, the British system, versus here, where here is a multiple choice and you don't have to cover all subjects, whereas in South Africa you had to cover all subjects.
Yeah, they were essay questions. We had short questions and then long questions. So you had a choice, like I can't remember exactly, if there were 7 short questions, you had to answer 4 or 5 of the 7 short questions. And if there were 5 long questions, you had to answer 4 of the 5 long questions. So you had a certain amount of choice, but they weren't multiple choice like here. So you had, you had the essay questions, and then you'd have to write an essay on, renal cell carcinoma in the elderly or something.
Yeah, but it was in depth.
Yeah, in depth.
If you skipped areas, you're going to be in trouble if you're asked on them.
Yeah, and also it wasn't multiple choice. So I think I studied the way that my brain worked, and I think I went about it in the right way. And I was certainly confident when I went in, and I never failed an exam. So, you know, from getting through the exam, but I should have concentrated more on the techniques of the surgery. I only learned, in fact, I think I learned that from Ralph Kleiman when I got to the States. And then he would make little cards on how the surgery was done by the different surgeons. And then when I started doing that, that was excellent, because then I was concentrating more on the technique. But that was only after I arrived in the States that I had this. So again, in urology, I could do, in South Africa, you know, I could do the stone surgery, and they were all open surgeries, mostly open surgeries at that time. I could do the endoscopic work, but we didn't do the big. I did do a big retroperitoneal node dissection. I remember for testicular cancer as a resident. And I remember presenting that at Grand Rounds with some nice photographs. But I didn't make notes of how each surgeon did it, and then from that work out how to do it myself. That evolved, which I think is natural to a degree, but I think I could have concentrated more on the techniques of surgery. Duplessis, our professor of surgery, always said, oh, you know, the techniques you'll learn, you've got to know, you've got to understand why you're doing it, and when to do it, and when not to do it, and how to manage the patient, and that's all very important. But he downplayed a little bit the actual techniques of surgery, and I think the techniques are really important. You know, how you handle tissue, how you get your knots to hold, where to go, knowing your anatomy. The anatomy I always loved. I always enjoyed the anatomy. So I was pretty good with that.
Keith, you mentioned Professor Duplessis, and I'd like to know the impact that he had on your career a little bit in a moment, and then your other teachers that influenced you at this stage, besides Dr. Van Black that you mentioned, and what they taught you and how that influenced you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had incredible mentors and teachers there. Professor Duplessis, professor of surgery, who not only looked like God with his white hair and his big guy, but his nickname, which we believe he gave himself, was God also. And I was very fortunate. I was class president in my final year at medical school, and the class president, I think, automatically was invited by Professor Duplessis to be his intern on his floor, and you had to be invited to be an intern on his floor. So I was his houseman, as we called it at that stage, and that was great. Doing a house run.
That was a big honor.
Yeah, that was great. I've got the book. This is how you knew how well you'd done with Duplessis. He'd give us this book, The Student Life, and what he wrote inside was what he thought of you. So this is the copy, and he said, to Dr. Kaye, with happy memories of a very good and delightful intern, with my sincere good wishes for a successful future, DJ Duplessis, December 1968.
Keith, I've never seen that.
Really?
And that is amazing coming from him, because that's very generous.
So here is The Student Life, edited by Richard Verney, The Philosophy of Sir William Osler.
Thanks for sharing
that. That's what Duke gave me. So he'd write, if he just said, with best wishes or something, you hadn't done so well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I was quite happy with that. But he was absolutely as tough as anything. I remember before we even started, he interviewed us and he said, you'll start every day at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever time we got there. And he said, I don't care if you've been up the whole night, you will have on a clean white coat and you will be shaven and you'll wear your tie. He said, I don't mind if you've been up the whole night, that's of no interest to me. You just make sure everything had to be perfect. There was no excuse for anything. and he let me off once. I remember we were on grand rounds, and grand rounds there was Dupe, and then there was his senior lecturers and the junior guys, and then the registrars, and then us little housemen trailing behind. We had to do all the dog work. We didn't have phlebotomists and things like that. We had to get all our bloods taken before the morning rounds. And we came up, and he asked me what a clotting time, or no, it must have been a prothrombin index or something at that time, and I hadn't done it, and I tried to weasel out of it, and I was stammering and stuttering.
Like now.
And I remember, as I was standing there stammering away, I heard the sister in charge, Sister Bowl, saying, now Keith's going to get it. And then somehow, I don't know how, but he was looking at me, asking me, well, it should have been, now tell me, Keith, or Kaye, or Dr. Kaye, or Kaye, whatever it is, how was this? What did you do? What was the result? And eventually he turned around, he looked at me, and he turned around and he went away, and he said, next time, Kaye, make sure you actually do the PI. I don't know how I got out of that one. But so everything had to be perfect. One stage he had the registrar, there was a cigarette stump on the floor, and he made the registrar get down on his hands and knees and scrub the floor. So everything had to be perfect.
So what did you learn from him?
I think we learned how to handle a patient, we learned how to do things properly, we learned fluid and electrolytes. We didn't so much actually learn, again, operative technique from him. I could have, if I would have been bright enough to have made notes and then tried, but that's certainly as a houseman and even as a registrar, making so sure that everything was in order, that everything was right, and assisting, holding the retractor properly, and I wasn't pushy, I should have been more pushy. Some guys, did a lot, like Rene Buerta, he was doing transplants and everything. So I did a lot, but I probably could have done more. And I think we had a good training, but it could have been even better. Some of the other teachers, Dupe was the one that set the standard. And then we had Bert Myberg, an incredible guy, Springbok athlete, looked like a film star, brilliant Rhodes Scholar. I was never in his ward, but he certainly gave us lectures. On the medical, doing my house jobs in medicine at Barrow with Asher Dubb was fantastic. Learned a lot from him on how to handle patients and just how to be a good general doctor. So we were very lucky in our training going to.
Keith, how, with your dad being on faculty, how did that impact you, do you think?
Yeah, no, well, he was professor and head of radiology, as you know, and I loved it. For me, it was great. Firstly, just him being there, and like before, in fifth year, before we did radiology, I went to him and he gave me the lectures on a personal basis. So I got to hear them directly from him in his office, and then a week or two later he'd give the same lecture to the class. So that was nice. I loved having my dad as the professor of radiology. I never actively used it as I'm the son of the professor of radiology, but it was really nice that he was there, and I think he obviously enjoyed having me there as well. And then he'd have fun sometimes when I was class president and he was lecturer, and he finished giving the lecture. And, could the class president please come and see me at the end of his lecture?
My mum was a teacher where I was at school, and I was shy and a little embarrassed if I heard her voice. Did nothing bothered you in any way?
No, it really didn't. I liked it. I enjoyed knowing he was there. And, yeah.
Did it make you feel like you had your expectations were higher because he was there? The expectations of you.
Yeah, not because he was there. I had expectations. I just did it. I knew what I wanted to do, and I did it. I wasn't worried about
it, yeah.
My parents say, "Oh, you better work hard and become a doctor." That never happened. I never said. I just knew that what I wanted to do, and I did it. That's all I can say. It was pretty straightforward.
Okay, and then anything else of your teachers in South Africa, or?
I'm sure I'm missing out on a lot, and I should have a lot more. I just, again, another incident with Du Plessis. We used to have to prepare talks when we were 6 months on his ward, either as houseman or as registrars. And then I prepared a talk, and at that stage we didn't have projectors or slides. We made them out on cardboard posters. So I made all these posters, and I put them up on the wall. But I didn't know I put them up with tape.
Oh.
And I don't know whether he said something at the beginning about putting tape on the wall. In any case, when I took the tape off, the paint came off with the tape. So I didn't get into too much trouble. I didn't get into trouble about it really, but it was certainly advised not to do that again. And then I remember on a Friday afternoon after grand rounds, he would the registrars would have to have the case summaries of all the patients who'd been discharged, and we had to do those. We had to dictate it and then check them. And he would sit there and he'd put his hand out like this, and he'd say, Mrs. Jones, and then you'd put Mrs. Jones and you'd look through it. And Mr. So-and-so, and you'd look through it, just sit there and check it out. So that was, got through that. And then Saturday morning was grand rounds with all the faculty and all the students, and everybody came to surgery grand rounds.
Did you have to pour the tea there?
I don't remember. I really don't. We might have. I don't remember. But I do remember having to prepare everything. If we had a case to present, you better be sure that was perfectly presented and everything was right. And because then there would often be overseas visitors coming who would give a talk. They were pretty spectacular rounds.
And Keith, when you informed the staff members like Professor Du Plessis and Professor Van Black that you were coming to the States, how did they react to you?
I think, firstly, at that stage we were only going to come, the plan was to come to the States to further our training, and we weren't planning on staying. I don't think I had anything very negative to say. At one stage, I can't remember whether it was before I left or when I came back and saw Professor Du Plessis. I think it might have been before I left. He said something about, well, you're going to the States where everybody wants to go to. And again, there wasn't anything overt about coming as we were going to come. There certainly was subtle hints that if you were going to emigrate, that was certainly frowned upon. But our opportunities were a little different. So again, I didn't see anything very. Van Black was a little upset with me because I think I left about a month before my residency in urology actually finished, because they needed me in the States. So I know he was not too happy with that, but that's just the way it was.
So Keith, I know that we were always interested in coming for the experience, coming to the States and working. How did it evolve that we came to Minneapolis?
Okay, well, talking about that, we were always going to go to the States. I remember I thought a great part of the States to go to would be Hawaii, and I'd even written to somebody in Hawaii to see if we could go there, but that never panned out. And then, I mean, it's incredible, throughout my life I've had all these amazing opportunities and luck. Arthur Smith, who had been my chief resident in general surgery in Professor Duplessis' ward. So he was chief resident when I was a houseman, and Dave Coombs was a houseman under Arthur. Arthur then did his full training in general surgery, just like I did. He then did urology in South Africa under Duplessis, under Van Blerk. And then he emigrated to America, and he ended up with Elwyn Fraley in Minneapolis. And then when I started urology, I was finishing urology. I had about a year to go. Arthur brought Elwyn Fraley to the South African Urological Association meeting in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. And then we were at that meeting, and obviously chatted to Arthur, who we knew pretty well, and his wife Kaye. And then at that stage, in a 6 months or a year's time, they needed to have somebody to act as a chief resident at the University of Minnesota for a year. And so Arthur spent about till 3 o'clock in the morning talking to us about coming to the University of Minnesota. And we met, and Elwyn Fraley was there, and we had the opportunity to meet him. And I think Jean was there as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we met them all there. And then, I mean, again, it was just incredible. Here they made everything easy for us. They brought us in on a green card, whereas other people just struggled to get a position. Here we had this open sesame. And then the funny story was that we both had our ECFMG, Educational Council for Foreign Medical Graduate exams, which just enabled us to practice or to come into the country. But then they brought out this new visa requirement for physicians, the VQE, the Visa Qualifying Exam. And you said to me, well, we better go and do it. And I said, well, listen, I'm busy with my board exams in urology. I haven't got time to go and write the VQE. And I said, in any case, we're only going to go there for a while, so we probably won't need it. So you wrote the VQE. And then when the time came to get our visas to come in, I couldn't get a visa, even though the job was offered to me in the urology department. So Arthur and Elwyn Fraley then created a pseudo position for you in the department, as you were the only person in the whole world who could look at some cells or something.
I was counting markers.
Counting markers. And so you got the pseudo job, and I remember you had to sign a piece of paper under the table that you wouldn't force them to give you the job. And I had to come into the country as your dependent, 2 steps behind you through immigration. So we had that fantastic opportunity coming in on a green card.
Okay, so we came to Minneapolis, it was in the fall of 79, right?
Right, September.
Okay, and can you describe what happened?
Well, I was pretty anxious because, if you could make it in America, you could make it anywhere, sort of was the attitude, and it was going to be tough with a lot of very, very bright people. And then, firstly, we were very lucky. Elwyn Fraley gave us his beautiful summer house on Lake Minnetonka to stay in. So again, what an introduction to the country, coming in on a greenhouse, on a green card, and living in this beautiful house on this magnificent lake. It's not a bad way to come into the country. And Jessica was born at that stage. And then I started off at the VA hospital, and they started doing like radical prostatectomies, which we'd never done in South Africa. We weren't doing this big cancer surgery. So I started learning all of that, and then Arthur started with his endourology, which was again an amazing time to be in the department. And there was Arthur and Ralph Clayman and I at the VA hospital doing this very interesting, exciting work, and I was just learning American ways.
Where was Paul Lang?
He was head of the department. He was head of the department at that stage.
At
the VA, yeah. So Paul was head. There was Arthur and Ralph and Ralph was a resident with me. I think he was a year ahead of me or something. Well, I was acting as chief resident, but he was chief resident. I don't know exactly how it worked, but we were contemporaries. So besides learning the differences in surgery, there were differences in attitude, both to the work and to patients. Now, for example, the one thing I remember very clearly, going on outreach with Arthur Smith, and we'd fly in these little planes to the small towns around Minneapolis, about an hour's flight away. And then the first time I went with him, and he went to this patient, and he said, well, look, you've got prostate cancer, and you can do this and this and this. And I was just aghast, because in South Africa, we'd never come out and say, oh, you've got cancer. And you talk around it, well, if we leave it, it could become cancer, and you might tell the family that the patient's got cancer. But so it was a different way. You were absolutely direct with the patient, told them the situation, and that was, at first it was shocking, but then it was easier on us as doctors, I think, and much better for the patient, and the patient's participating in his or her care. So I found that was interesting to do. And the other thing that I found different and very exciting was that in South Africa we were basically told what to do and how to do it. Well, certainly this is how I perceived it. Whereas in the States is well, how can you improve what's being done? And I saw this with Arthur and his endourology. Well, let's try this and let's try that and see how this goes and see how that goes. And I can't remember, something van Blerk said, well, in South Africa, if somebody gave me this answer in an exam, I would fail him. And you'd come to the States and the attitude would be, well, why don't you see how you can do it, or see what you can do. And particularly, I remember one example. I'd given a talk in South Africa at our rounds on, I think, neurogenic bladder, and I hadn't done personal research on it, but it was a summary review of the literature. And one of the faculty said, "Well, Keith, why don't you write a paper for that, for the South African Medical Journal?" And I went to Van Blerk and said, that Dr. Trubshaw or something had said I should write a paper on this. And he said, oh, well, no, the only people who write papers on neurogenic bladder is if you've been involved in it for many years. Which I don't think was totally wrong, but I wasn't encouraged to publish or encouraged to do it. I was held back. Whereas coming to Minneapolis, I had a kind of exact opposite experience. I think I'd been there for a year or 18 months or something. And it must have been longer. It must have been 1.5, 2 years maybe. And I was supposed to do a cystectomy that day, which was going to take the whole day. And there was a massive big storm, snowstorm, and I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to drive to work because there'd been radio reports, and I got up so early that it was probably before the reports came out. But in any case, I took my little car, my little yellow Honda, and drove to the VA and found that I was the only one there. And I couldn't get home, so I had the whole day to myself, and I sat down and worked out things that I was doing as an outpatient, because there was such a backlog of cases to be admitted that I started doing things on an outpatient basis, and then started publishing various papers on outpatient surgery in urology because of the necessity for it. And then this day I'd published, I don't know how many papers on it, and wrote them down. I thought, wow, maybe I could actually get to edit a book, say the Urology Clinics of North America, on outpatient surgery in urology. And had this idea, and I thought, well, I'll go and speak to Dr. Fraley about it. And I remember so clearly going up to his office and said, look, Dr. Fraley, I've got this idea, and I showed him, all I had, and he looked at it and he said, well, Keith, I'm sure we can get you a urology clinics if you want, but I think you've got enough material here to publish your own book. don't you want to publish your own book? So I said, well, yeah, if you think so. He said, yeah, hang on a second. He got on the phone. He got to the publishers. Lee and Fabiger was the publisher that he knew. And he said, look, I've got this guy, Dr. Keith Kaye, with me, who's got an idea for a book, and what do you think of it? In any case, he got me the publishers, and we eventually got to publish outpatient surgery, outpatient urologic surgery. Oh, here it is. Oopsie. Goof up. So we got to publish outpatient urologic surgery, and then I got everybody to sign. I think, is this the signed copy? I'm not sure. No, it's not. This is not the signed copy. But that was pretty exciting putting that together, and it turned out to be 2 or 3 years of work.
So Keith, do you think the outpatient surgery started because of a sense of need, that there was no inpatient room?
Yeah, at the VA, yeah, definitely. We had all these people waiting for these surgeries, and because there were no beds available, so then I started doing them on an outpatient basis, and that was...
So was it something that you started? Was it you, or just...
Yeah, but you know, many things when you start doing them, you find you're part of a movement. There had been... I wasn't conscious of it at the time. Once I started doing it, and then started seeing that there was books on outpatient surgery, general surgery. So yeah, I mean, I think I started in neurology because this was the first textbook on outpatient surgery that ever came out, and obviously the papers were the papers that hadn't come out on vasovasostomy and varicocele and hydrocele and all the various things, and then techniques of using local anesthetic. So yeah, these were new things, and my timing was right because there were the outpatient surgery centres that were being developed at the time. So again, you find yourself part of the movement. So yeah.
And then Keith, you were part of the endourology team. How did you become, doing what you did?
Okay. Well, Arthur was basically the Fraley and Lang were like the fathers of endourology. It was being done a little bit in Europe, but really they were the fathers of it. So I was there. I was not involved in it all that much. In fact, in a way, I dropped the ball because when Arthur left the VA, Paul Lang said, "Keith, don't you want to take over, what Arthur was doing?" And I think I was involved with my outpatient surgery stuff. So I dropped the ball on that, and then he offered it to Ralph Clayman, who picked it up and, of course, has become just spectacular with it. Now I've lost the track of what the question was.
I know, but I mean, that's... So
I really wasn't doing much of the endourology because, Arthur and Ralph and primarily were doing it. But I was involved in that. Arthur said, "Okay, we're doing a chapter. We're doing a urology clinics of North America on endourology, and Keith, you're going to write the chapter on the urologic anatomy." So I said, "Okay." So here's this very first book ever on endourology. In urology, so Urologic Clinics of North America, February 1982, and then the very first article, I think, was my article. There was the introduction. So there's Arthur edited the book, and then he wrote here, "To Keith, thanks for an anatomically perfect chapter, Arthur." And then here was my chapter, Applied Anatomy of Kidney and Ureter, Keith W.K. I was an instructor then. And then this was the start of a lot of lectures on anatomy, so that was fun.
So then you were part of that whole team because you traveled around the country giving the courses on endourology, and you were very much part of that.
Yeah, so it started off just giving the anatomy lecture, and then I made that out. I'd get pig kidneys, and then I'd give the course on renal anatomy during the course and the lectures, and this was really, really exciting because endourology, I remember when Ralph Clayman and I were in a little plane going on outreach, and he said he's going to put on this course in endourology, and I said, wow, do you think you'll get enough people? And he said, well, I hope so. If we don't, then we'll have to cancel it out. And then after it had been advertised initially, there were hardly any people, and they were talking about cancelling it. And then the people came, and then it became such a hot topic that there were courses coming all over the place. We were invited to lecture all over the place. And then one time we had a course in Minnesota on a Saturday and Sunday. Arthur had now left and gone to Long Island, to New York, and he was putting on a course at the same time, and I was asked to lecture on both courses, and normally my lectures were at the beginning. So I gave the lecture in Minneapolis on a Saturday morning. I gave my laboratory session with the kidneys that afternoon, and then I literally ran to the airport in Minneapolis, caught a plane, went to New York, and then Arthur had rearranged the way that I gave mine on the Sunday and did the same thing again on the Sunday. And that was exciting.
It was a very active time and busy time for you.